Welcome, everyone. This is Jim Sporer with ISSIP, the International Society of Service Innovation Professionals, and it's my great pleasure today to introduce Sarah Lebovitz from University of Virginia, and I'm just going to show the ISSIP Award Certificate that we give out each year. We have a competition for members of the community to submit their service innovations that they've achieved over the years. This one, as you can see, is an innovation with impact innovation. And the judges thought not only was this a service innovation, but it was going to impact future innovations. And we're going to find out a little bit more about it today. As we know, AI is permeating every aspect of business and society, but especially the medical profession has been one that's adopted AI to help with critical judgment. And Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you and stop sharing, and please feel free to present.
Great. Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to win this award and also to join you and share the research today. So let me just get this going. There we go. Okay, right. So I find ISSIP just to be such a wonderful organization, and I'm honored to be involved in the, included in this showcase of the impactful and important work that's also across the community. And I'm hoping that this presentation spurs more conversation and can kind of bring together more of this community who are studying adjacent questions, or if you find this research interesting, if you think of ways to extend it. Me and my co-authors are very open to these conversations, and we find this is where the real innovation happens, is through these dialogues. So I'm happy to share, and thank you for the award and the invitation. So I am an organizational researcher. I study how new technologies are actually changing work, how people are using them, how it's changing what they think of their work, what they think of themselves, and how the organizations around these new technologies are being shaped and changed. And what are the consequences for individuals, organizations, society at large? So when I think of the new technologies that are emerging today, obviously, as Jim just mentioned, I think AI is on a lot of people's minds. So I've been studying AI for the past 6 years, and I take a very in-depth kind of longitudinal approach. And that is what I'll share with you today, some insights from a study of AI in diagnosis. And this work is in collaboration with Natalia Levina, who's at NYU Stern School of Business, and Hila Lifshitz-Asaf, who's at the Warwick Business School. So in AI, I know many of you are familiar and probably have seen these even come across your headlines this morning. We see the number of AI tools and publications claiming that AI can outperform and exceed the best professionals in growing numbers of fields. We see this in law, in managerial overseeing, in driving, architecture, art, music, writing, right now with the writer's strike too. So we see this across countless fields, and we're really witnessing this remarkable potential for transformation. And in particular, the context of medicine is really a place where a lot of innovation, a lot of investment and development is happening. So back in 2018, when I set out to really take an in-depth look at what's happening on the ground, the context of radiology was getting a lot of attention and excitement. There were just headline after headline coming out around the potential for AI to perform diagnosis better than human experts. There, at the keynote speaker at the annual radiology conference, which is this massive international event, was talking all about how the future is here, all about AI and its potential in medicine. There were, huge showcases about trying to learn about how to use ML for their practice and develop new tools. And they even had their own radiology artificial intelligence journal emerge in 2019. So there was a lot of excitement, a lot of energy. And AI in medicine has actually been around for decades, as many of you may know. And the big question was, is this time different? Will things be new now? And there's been immense technological advancements. in, image recognition and computational processing abilities. So many people really thought there was reason to believe that there would be new outcomes now that they didn't achieve decades prior. And the promise is really compelling. And, as a part, we all are members of healthcare systems. So we hope that AI can achieve these promises. We want it to have this higher quality, better accuracy, faster speeds, more efficiency, which could drive down costs and increase, access. This is all the promise of AI. And it's what the developers and vendors and economists are kind of banking on, and they're writing a lot in the media around this. But my research, this research, is going beyond that hype, going beyond that discourse to really see what is happening. Is it higher quality and better accuracy and faster speeds on the ground? What's really happening in organizations where people are really using these tools to make decisions? And that's what led to this research. So on the left is what I'll share for the next 15 minutes or so. But I also want to highlight what also emerged was this paper on the right, which it really investigates how do we know if AI is better quality? And the answer is really surprising. We don't know in many cases. So I'll just sort of plug that for future discussion. But today I'll focus on the question on the left. How are these experts really using AI tools in practice? And this was published in Organization Science 2022. And I'll briefly share and hope to have more discussion around this following this presentation. So the current discussion around AI and work, when we read about it in the media and these economic reports and analysis, it's viewed through the lens of these polarized distinction between AI will automate or AI will augment work. It will either replace humans or be used in this kind of AI-human collaboration. It's kind of situated at these poles. They talk about when it will happen, where it will happen, how long it will take. It really doesn't leave a lot of room for discussion inside that margin. What is the texture of what this will look like and what will it mean for workers and organizations? So our study focuses on augmenting. This is not a case of automation in radiology specifically. There are a lot of regulatory requirements keeping it in the realm of augmentation for now. So this is a focus on augmentation, really opening up this question of what is augmentation. When we look at even the definition of augmentation, it's this idea of improvement, of getting better and more and improving, enhancing something. And in AI human augmentation, the writing is around multiplying their unique capabilities, combining their complementary strengths in this way that kind of the sum is better than, or the outcome is better than the sum of their parts. So we set out to ask, there are some assumptions built into this, and we wanted to tear apart and understand whether these assumptions are really holding. So is the machine actually adding a complementary and valuable expertise? And are the workers, are those experts, the humans, are they actually collaborating? Are they combining them in practice? So does the definition hold in reality? And, spoiler alert, it does not. And that's what we're going to show. We're really not seeing this vision of augmentation really come to life in most cases in this study. And the second question this leads is, well, how do you collaborate with a black box anyways? We're used to using a lot of black box machines in our daily life. I don't know how my dishwasher works or how my car works, and yet I get in it every day and commute and trust it, to drive me to work. But in a collaborative context, in AI that is supposed to be used by experts to help their decision-making, we know that collaboration requires this combination of expertise, this knowledge integration process. And it's unclear how that happens when one of the collaborators is a black box. So we know a lot about collaboration from organizational literature and research, and we know that it requires collaborators to do this reflective process where they don't just understand the other's inputs, but they also have this integrative process where they incorporate that knowledge into their own. And it's unclear how you do that when a black box tool cannot explain its reasoning, where it cannot explain what is the logic behind its outputs. And so this opens that question. And yet we know that for many contexts beyond just medicine, that AI that is opaque is being implemented, and experts are being expected and required in some cases to use them. So this leads us to the question at the heart of this study, which is, how do professionals deal with opacity, with that black box tool, when they're using AI and making critical decisions? And that criticalness is important because these decisions have stakes. They have, in this case, life and death stakes. They really matter. There's consequences. It's, this is the kind of the boundary around this. These are questions that really carry a lot of weight for these professionals. So the design of the research is a qualitative field study. We spent 11 months really understanding in depth through hours and hours, over 500 hours of observation, how radiologists do their work and how are AI tools being used or not used. So we studied our over 500 hours of observation. This included over 40 radiologists at a major hospital in the US and observed over 1,000 different diagnosis processes. And this is a unique setting because it's a teaching hospital. And so when I was sitting alongside the radiologists, there were also medical students and residents who were learning how to do radiology. So the senior doctors were actually articulating out loud their thought process and having this dialogue with the students, which is a goldmine for a qualitative researcher. And I really understood what are the factors making their decisions and how are the AI tools making a difference or not. We also conducted interviews to understand and discuss in more depth with the doctors and how they were going about this work. And we also studied some documentation and artifacts secondhand. So the study compares 3 different contexts where AI was being used in practice. And I won't be able to go through all 3 in detail. I'll spend a little bit of extra time on the breast department and compare it with the chest. And the pediatric case is very interesting as well. I encourage you to refer to the paper or follow up separately. So the basic sequence of augmentation looks different in any context. And in medicine, it's regulated to look like this. So first you have the professional making their initial diagnosis, and they have to form this independent opinion first, and then they can consult the AI tool. At least that was the regulation at the time of this study. Then there may be this period where they have to reconcile their opinion and the AI's, and they finally make their diagnosis, which gets sent off to clinicians and patients for further treatment plans. And in all 3 cases that I studied, there was, the vast majority of times, there was actually different opinions coming from the AI tool and the radiologist. And this is despite the fact, or in spite of the fact that the AI tools were meant and advertised as being excellent, high quality, high performing, outperforming experts. So the question of how do they in practice resolve this conflicting information became really the heart of this study. And so in the case first of breast cancer diagnosis, you see here a typical workstation of a radiologist with many images, prior images on the left, the central images that they're, the mammogram in this case that they're investigating in front of them, and additional patient information. You also see to the right the patient queue. So these individuals were under extreme time pressure. They hardly took breaks. They ate at their desk while reviewing. They were under extreme time pressure and facing huge workloads that were causing them to be very quick and rapid through their work. So how were they making this initial diagnosis? So you see to the right, this is kind of a GIF of a mammogram being scanned through. It's a a visually overwhelming task. They're trying to identify subtle differences, subtle distortions in the breast tissue, subtle differences between parts of the anatomy. And a typical radiologist at the hospital I studied would look at up to 100 of these every day, which meant spending sometimes less than 2 minutes, 3 minutes on every case, really a fast time pressure environment. And this was a really high stakes critical decision where making a mistake of omission could mean missing a cancer diagnosis, making a mistake of overdiagnosis could mean unnecessary emotional and physical financial burdens of additional procedures. This was a task they experienced a lot of uncertainty with. They questioned themselves. They would really experience a lot of doubt. And here, one of the doctors I have saying, we worry about the really faint and tiny ones. Those are the signs of early cancer. They're the ones you can barely see. It's like looking for a snowball in a snowstorm. So it's really the perfect case, if you think about it, for an artificial intelligence tool that is really good and never gets tired at looking at tiny details and differences in images. So the tool has been in use for a number of years, actually, and it continually was updated to incorporate the most modern technology the vendors would create, and they would send updates to the use. So this was a neural network that was meant to, with just a single click of the radiologist's mouse, to display a star or a triangle or a circle on the image itself to draw their attention to what was likely to be malignant in their neural network. But in the vast majority of cases, there were conflicting views, and this led the radiologist to have to reconcile them before making their final result. So we can break this down into a kind of a decision matrix here. And in some cases, there were cases when either in case A or case D, where there was agreement that something was definitely dangerous or something areas were definitely not dangerous. And in these, there was, they were using the tool, but it wasn't really changing their diagnosis. They would kind of blindly just assume that they were in alignment. And in these cases, they would say, it isn't helping anyone. It's just actually another step for me to do. It actually slowed them down to have to go through this. And as I mentioned, this time pressure was very, very salient. And this extra seconds were actually costly to them. But they would kind of move through it as they would. In the other box C, if the doctor would think something was dangerous and the tool didn't call it to their attention, they would ignore these across the board. I had never observed a case where they had a concern and the tool said, no, this looks normal. In fact, in this quote, she says, if there's something concerning to you and the tool says, oh, this looks normal, you wouldn't use that information to say, okay, we won't biopsy it now. They were using the AI tool in that they were activating it, they were viewing the results, but this knowledge integration that we would expect in a collaborative, partnership wasn't happening. They were ignoring these claims. And in the final box B, this happened over half of the time, dealt with this conflict, where the tool, the radiologists call these false positives. The tool would flag an area that they just weren't concerned about. And in these cases, they now experience this surge in uncertainty. They're already experiencing a lot of doubt. And now they have this new doubt because, as this quote says, what is it telling me to look at? At this tissue? It looks just like the tissue over here, which is perfectly normal. I have no idea what it's thinking. So they would have this conflicting information and no ability to understand why it said its result. And this led to almost universal ignoring of these AI claims. They say, I blow so many of the AI results off. Like if there's normal scarring or stable calcs, which is a benign finding, the AI tool is going to pick up everything. And so they blow them off. So we describe in the paper, I know this model, is a little complicated for this format, but we've described this process of unengaged augmentation, where they form their initial view, they consider the claim, they have this surge of uncertainty because of the opacity, and it leads them to not relate the AI tool's claim to their own, and they just either kind of blindly go with or blindly ignore those claims. We call this unengaged augmentation. So I'm going to contrast that with a positive story where we see actually engaged augmentation. And that's happening in this case in the lung cancer diagnosis context. And there are so many similarities between this and the previous case, which is why this was really interesting to us as researchers. So there are many similarities to the actual diagnosis. You can see to the right, here we're using a CT scan, which is a different modality. You're moving horizontally through the lungs and thoracic region. And it's also a visually overwhelming case. They're viewing fewer of these per day, and it's just a portion, one component of a wider range of things that these radiologists specialize in. They're spending a little longer on these cases. They're not as strapped for time. But again, they're looking for these tiny subtle differences that are very difficult to see. And the stakes of missing and the stakes of overdiagnosing are the same. Here they say, I think I see a nodule. Am I hallucinating a nodule? I think it's there, but it's hard to see. It's in a bad location. It's behind the ribs. So it's impossible to get a good look at. Again, there was an AI tool that was technologically very similar as the previous tool in the breast cancer case. Here, they're adding with the click of their mouse, the AI results appear, and they show them as a little circle that indicates where the abnormality is identified. But again, we see over the majority, over half, a vast majority of the cases end in conflicting opinions that the radiologist then has to reconcile. So just like in the previous case, we saw a handful of cases where there was agreement. And in these cases, these radiologists were really happy, and they actually expressed a lot of enthusiasm around these positive cases. They would say, if I don't see any lung nodules and the tool doesn't, then okay, we're good. I feel comfortable saying there's no nodules. It puts a big smile on my face. So there were cases of increasing confidence. But in the majority, the results were conflicting. And in either case here, we also saw, just like in the previous case, this opaque AI with no explanations causes their uncertainty to really surge. How does the AI tool know that this is a nodule, but this isn't? These are the questions that they're asking as I'm observing them in their work. Unprompted, he's saying, there must be someone inputting this data. Like, this is a nodule and this is a nodule, but I have no idea what that data looks like. That quote was from an interview as I was asking them around how they were interpreting the results. But unlike the previous case, in the lung diagnosis case, we see this engaged use of what we call AI interrogation practices. These were practices that helped the professional, the expert, analyze the AI output and then incorporate it and actually update their judgment as a result. So what did it look like? So we saw that after they had conflicting results, they would zoom in, they would interrogate, they would go back to the CT, they would look at prior images, they would change the settings, and they would really do what they could with their technology. And they said, it's worth the extra time in my mind. And we call this an engaged form of augmentation, which is really contrasted to the previous form of unengaged. Here, they were building an understanding of the result, even though they had opacity, and they were demonstrating this willingness to change and integrate their knowledge claims. And there was a reflective sense of either agreeing or overruling it with this reflective sense, or synthesizing the claims. And so in the paper, we show this model of two different paths, one that leads up toward the engaged form, where there's actual knowledge and collaboration, and the unengaged form, which we find to be rather, alarming and scary. And there are a number of reasons why. Our study doesn't exactly allow us to get into the why, but there are other studies happening in other contexts that are working on unpacking this. So whether there's some time pressure, whether that was a main difference, or the modality between CT scans and mammograms, if these were a difference, financial incentives, et cetera. So there are a number of hypotheses we have on why some had AI interrogation practices and some did not, but it's still in the form of hypothesis at this point. So I'll wrap up just briefly for 2 minutes talking about some of our contributions. So I started this talk about, highlighting the difference between that there's this polarized view of augmentation and automation, and we really problematize this idea of augmentation. And we question who or what is actually being augmented here. If augmentation is assuming that organizations are going to be achieving positive outcomes, it's usually by improving either the quality of knowledge, the accuracy, or speed and efficiency, or both. So is the augmentation happening? Well, from an efficiency standpoint, this study shows it's not happening. And they're actually taking longer to do this integrating work. Just to click in an unengaged way, it's still taking longer because they're expected to use this tool. And we really feel that as companies and push towards efficiency, it can be a risky goal because it pushes toward less engagement and more unengaged, blind acceptance, or what we really want is this reflective, combining, augmenting experience. So we find that to be an interesting insight. And secondly, from a quality perspective, it is completely unclear. And this is the study that I referenced earlier in our other publication. And it's very difficult to have a very strong ground truth to know if accuracy is improving, because in medicine and in many fields, ground truth lacks external validation. So it's really hard to know which was right and who was right, whether to ignore or whether they should have ignored. So it's really unclear even to know whether augmentation is improving knowledge quality. And this is definitely an area for more research that needs to happen. And lastly, we hear a lot about the black box AI and opacity, and we have some interesting insights to say about this. So first, typically AI is kind of associated with opacity. They say AI is opaque, AI is unexplainable, it is a black box. And this is a fiercely debated topic in many conversations. And what we see is actually that tools that can be similarly unexplained, or they present to the user similar opacity, they had different uses in practice. And it's really about how the tool is used and how the new processes and practices around that experts develop around the AI tool help them to relate their knowledge claim. And so while there's this massive effort around explainable AI and interpretable AI, which we full-heartedly support and think is really helpful, that is a way to have engaged augmentation in our view, we also think that paying attention to what additional work practices can help, even if the tool is unexplained, and giving professionals the time and allowing them to do that integrative work will really make the difference. Okay, so thank you so much again to ISSIP and to all of you for viewing this, and we really look forward to your engagement. Please reach out, and thank you and have a wonderful day. And any questions? Yes, Jim, I see you're back.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. That was great, very clear and concise. And I have to say, when I read the paper, I'd been studying augmentation, AI augmentation for quite some years. And I felt like the framing, the definition you used, and then the notion of engaged augmentation and unengaged augmentation really added a lot to my understanding. So thank you for this clear, concise presentation. I'd like to invite any of the participants now. I see Deb Stokes says, excellent talk. Deb is our Vice President of ISSIP in 2023. She'll be our president next year. But please feel free to come off mute and turn on your camera if you would like. And I do have a couple questions for Sarah, but I'll let others jump in I'll give them space to jump in if they'd like. Okay. And I know, Anssi, you've been doing a lot with the healthcare system in Finland, so I'm curious your thoughts. I see you there. So Have you seen similar things or different things in Finland, Anssi?
Yeah, in the hospital sector, I think they are experimenting these tools, but the regulation is very strict at this moment in Finland. So I'm not sure if they have implemented any of the image recognition AI tools in the actual diagnosis process yet. So regulation is a bit different in Finland than in the United States. But I like the presentation of the insights. It sort of gives a critical viewpoint on the usability of AI in this kind of diagnosis process.
Yeah,
when the AI is not like good enough, but it's a sort of supporting tool for professional that it's already an expert user in their field.
Yeah.
So,
thank you. Yeah, I think actually studying across different regions is really important. And a question I got, and we thought a lot about is, do we think this would happen? We studied the top experts in the top, a top hospital. So what would happen if this was in a place that didn't have access to those experts? Would we, what would we want to see? And I think it's a really important question. So
So for example, for those people who are not, who cannot access healthcare, so it would be better than nothing to have AI system in place.
Right.
But for those,
Right. We were doing this research we were writing it up during COVID. And so we were thinking, all the people waiting for results, and all these AI tools were cropping up to help to diagnose. But even so, I don't know, it has its own, there's still a calculation, there's still some risk, but it is worth more study. That's where we stand.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we are at the end of our 30 minutes. So I did put Sarah's LinkedIn into the chat in case you want to look up and send any further questions. I do want to thank you, Sarah, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I will upload this recording to the ISSIP YouTube channel and send it around to everybody, as well as your slides that you sent, which were fantastic. And thank you all for joining this ISSIP session, and congratulations again on winning the Impact to Innovation Award. And I have no doubt this work will have a lot of future implications. So thank you, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.